What's up guys, it's Mitch here. Welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be taking you guys through the menu of my Canon EOS R, and we're going to be taking a look at all the settings that I use for shooting photography. As photographers, we already have enough obstacles as it is, whether it's the weather, the lighting, the subject that you're working with. We just want this camera to be like an extension of your arm, an extension of your eye and your creativity, and not get in the way. So that's why whenever I get a new camera, and when I got the EOS R, the first thing I did was went into the menus and I was like, okay, what buttons can I customize? How can I make things quicker? How can I make things more efficient? So I set up my camera in a way where I can get where I need to go without going into the menu and pressing as few buttons as possible. I'm going to be going through the menu settings one by one, so you guys can stop, pause, rewind whenever you need to if you miss anything. I'm going to be moving fairly quickly through this. I'm not going to be addressing every single item in the menu, otherwise this video would be like over 30 minutes long. I'm just going to go through the menu items that I changed, and if I gloss over anything, it's probably because I just leave it at the default setting. So let's jump into the first menu tab, the red menu, and our first item is going to be the image quality. So I definitely always shoot RAW. I don't choose to shoot a JPEG, I just don't see the point of it. I never use JPEGs, I'm always using the full RAW file. There is an option for compressed RAW, and I haven't really found a reason not to use compressed RAW yet. I just think that the comparisons that I've done myself and the ones that I've seen online, compressed RAW is really good. I'm not sure if it's lossless or lossy compression. I would definitely use it if I knew that I was gonna go 3 or 4 days without being able to back up my SD card. But at this stage, I just leave it at the normal RAW because I'm hardly ever filling this 128GB SD card anyway. The next setting on tab number 1 is the image review. I like to have this set at 2 seconds, just being able to see the image straight away after you've taken it, just to make sure everything looks good. So in the next tab, we have the lens aberration correction. I leave all of these off. Peripheral illumination, distortion correction, digital lens optimizer, all off. However, the chromatic aberration correction is on and diffraction correction is on. Because I use a lot of third-party lenses, not a lot of them are compatible with all these corrections, so I just leave them off. On the next tab, we've got the auto lighting optimizer off and the highlight tone priority off as well. So moving over, for the white balance, I usually just use the auto setting. And I like using, you have this option here of using ambience priority or white priority. I like the white priority. To me, that looks a little bit better, so that's what I go for. If you're shooting RAW, the picture profile doesn't matter at all. It doesn't embed any kind of information into the file. However, if you are showing somebody the images on the screen of the camera, this is going to determine how they look. So if you want to go ahead and change this, go ahead and do it. However, it doesn't really matter at all. In the next tab, the long exposure noise reduction is off, and the high ISO speed noise reduction is off as well. The touch shutter is enabled by default, I think. However, I like to have this disabled. With touch shutter enabled, whenever you touch the screen, it's going to focus on that point and take a photo straight away. You probably don't want this setting. You want to touch where you want the camera to focus, and then when you're ready to take the photo, then you focus and hit the shutter. So moving over to the next menu section, this is the autofocus. Straight away on tab number 1, we have the AF operation. Now you have an option to choose either one shot or servo. So one shot means you half press the shutter button, it's going to focus once, and then the focus is not going to change until you half press the shutter again. Servo means that as long as you have that half press on the shutter, it's going to continually keep focusing. So I actually think that one shot is better for things like landscape, things where you don't have moving subjects. However, if you're using face tracking, I think servo is good as well. I mainly stick to one shot, however. In the AF method, you'll notice that we've got a lot of options here. However, only 2 of them are selectable and the rest are grayed out. And that is because I only use these 2 modes, and I've actually limited the camera to only be able to select these 2 modes. So if we scroll over into, I think it is tab number 5. If we scroll over to tab number 5, you'll see there's an option there that says limit AF methods. And then you can simply tick and untick different methods. So I know that I only use face and eye tracking and the single point focus. So I only have those two ticked. I think that you should experiment with these AF methods and just choose the ones that you use the most, because when you're switching between the two, it's going to be a lot quicker. You know, you don't have to scroll through all these different settings to find the one that you want. This actually saves so much time, and it makes you way less confused when you're shooting. So the eye detection autofocus I usually have on, but it really depends on the situation. I think when you're shooting up close, when you're shooting portraits, it definitely makes sense to have eye detection on. When you're shooting maybe environmental portraits, something a little bit further back, where critical focus on the eye isn't as important, the rule is basically, yeah, most of the time have that eye detection on if you're shooting people. Also, the touch and drag autofocus is disabled on my camera. It basically means that when you've got your eye up to the viewfinder, you can actually put your finger on the screen and select the autofocus point. I don't really use that. I found that sometimes I bump it and my nose will make a selection on the screen, which is not good. So I just leave that disabled. So moving over to the third tab now, and I just leave all these settings at default. However, I think you should play around with it and see what you like best. So that's all I'm going to be touching in the autofocus menu. So we'll move over to the playback menu, and in here I only change one setting, and that's on the third tab. If you go right down to the bottom, the magnification. So after you take a photo, usually you want to punch in and make sure it's all in focus and that it all looks good. And the default setting is to punch in 2 times. However, I like to change this to 4 times. I always found myself zooming in further to check the photos. So having this zoom in even further just right off the bat is actually a really good idea. Moving over to the wrench or the yellow menu, the first thing that I'll usually do when I get a new camera is change the file name. This is really important because if you've got multiple cameras on a shoot, you don't want duplicate file names. You don't want to be dragging like images into a folder and having them, you know, overwrite other images. So always, if you've got multiple cameras, give them unique file names. I've just called this one EOS R. When I had 3 5D Mark IIIs, I had Cam 1, Cam 2, Cam 3. That made sure that I never had duplicate file names. And also, I knew when I looked in the folder of images, okay, which camera was this file shot on? And that's really, really helpful as well. In this next tab on the yellow menu, we have some screen settings. So basically the display brightness, I have it set to 5. I think that's like a happy medium between acceptable screen brightness where you can see what you're doing, as well as, you know, saving a little bit of battery, because that's always a concern. Also, if you haven't done so, make sure you set your camera's date and clock. This is really important, especially if you have multiple cameras as well, because when you load all your photos into Lightroom and sort by capture time, all the photos will be in the perfect order that you shot them. We're done with the yellow menu now, and we're gonna jump over into the orange menu, and I'm really only concerned with tabs 4 and 5 here. This tab number 4 is where most of the ninja magic is gonna happen. We're gonna set up these buttons so that everything is just like super quick. We can get to where we need to go, we can change our settings, and boom, onto the next photo. You'll notice when you go into the custom buttons menu, you've got 2 different columns. One is for photo on the left-hand side and the other is for video. So we're just gonna be focusing on the photo side here. Now the first thing is the half press of the shutter. We're gonna have that start the autofocus. I think that's pretty standard. The movie button is gonna be starting movies. That's pretty straightforward. The MFN button, which is actually up on top of the camera right next to the shutter button, we're going to choose dial function, and then we're gonna hit the info button. This is gonna determine what this dial is going to do. And I have this set to the drive mode. Really quickly, if I want to switch between taking a single photo and a high speed or low speed continuous, I can do that really, really quickly with just one quick press and one scroll of the wheel, and then we're back to shooting again. So I just have the drive mode ticked, and then you're gonna hit info again to go next. And I only have one setting on this button. That's the only thing that I want there. So I'm just going to hit OK. However, you can choose different functions to like have assigned to this button. I just prefer just to have that one. So now we press set mode. So this is the mode dial on top, and that's just going to change the shooting mode. That's default as well. This next function allows you to change the ISO really, really quickly, and I highly recommend setting this up. The AF on button, I don't use at all. I don't do back button autofocus. I always use the shutter button to do my autofocusing. So I'm going to set this to ISO, so being able to change ISO when you hold this button down. So my thumb is already there when I'm shooting, and it's just a matter of pressing my thumb down. And then when I scroll the wheel, instead of it changing the shutter speed, it's going to now change the ISO. So this just makes it super quick to change my ISO whenever I need to, and I'm changing my ISO all the time, especially when I'm shooting video. So this is a super, super handy thing to have. to just shift your thumb over and bam, we're changing our ISO straight away. So our next button is the one right next to the AF on button, this little star, and this is the AE lock button. However, I'm not going to use it for that. Instead, I'm going to have this to change the autofocus method. So if I want to go between face tracking and the single point, all I need to do is press this button and it's right there, and that's super, super handy. So I can just switch between those two modes. This is why I said earlier, getting rid of all the other autofocus modes and only the ones that you prefer actually enables you to just press this button. I literally have to press it once and I change between the two autofocus modes that I prefer. So that's really, really handy and has made me so much faster during the shooting process. So the button underneath that is the AF point selection. So you would generally press this when you want to change that autofocus point. However, I find that using the screen, using my finger just to change the autofocus point is a lot quicker. And instead I have this just set to return the focus point back to the center. A lot of the time I just have my focus point in the center and then I focus and recompose. So this is really handy if I just want that focus point to just drift straight back to the center, and then bam, we're ready to start shooting again. And then I've got the up button on the D-pad actually set to change my focus point. This is just in case I need it, in case I want to use the D-pad and have keep my eye down that viewfinder. The left and right buttons, I just have them set to default. However, the down button is set to enter the menu. Now there is a dedicated menu button in the top left-hand corner of the camera up here. However, I just think it's way quicker because your hand isn't usually there, it's usually resting on the lens. If you need to go into the menu just to move your thumb, that makes it a lot quicker to go into the menu. So moving down to the custom dials, now I have my index finger scroll wheel, which is the one right next to the shutter button on top of the camera, set to change the shutter speed, and then the mode dial on top of the camera where your thumb is on the back is set to change the aperture. And then the control ring, which I don't use because I don't have a control ring, I don't have any RF lenses or the control ring adapter. It's set to ISO, but you know, you guys already know how I change my ISO. The touch bar, I disable this thing altogether. I think it's fairly useless. We're all done in tab 4. Now in tab 5, we've got the default erase option. When you're looking at your photos and you take a really shit photo and you decide, I hate this photo, I want it gone, and you hit the delete button, it's going to give you the option to delete or cancel. And usually cancel is selected first, and then you've got to move over and hit erase. I like to live dangerously, so I like to have this set to select erase. That just means when you hit the erase button, you hit OK straight away, the photo's gone, you move on to the next. It's just like, it saves like literally half a second, but I just like it set up that way. All right, we're done with the orange menu, moving over to the green one, the My Menu. This is where you want to set up all of your really frequently accessed menu items so you can just go boom, straight into the My Menu, bam, this is what I need to change, done. You can set up multiple tabs for the My Menu. I like to have most of my movie settings in there because there's not a lot of customization that you can do on the video side of things with the EOS R. Things like the movie record quality, digital IS, the time-lapse functions, I put them all in the My Menu so that they're right there, ready to go, ready to change when I need it. One thing that I reckon you should put in there is formatting the card. That just makes it way easier to get to instead of going through into the yellow menu onto the whatever tab, and I like to have that ready to go when I'm ready to format my card. So we're done with the menus. That's pretty much it. I don't change a whole lot of stuff. However, the things that I do change really are important and really matter to me and really make it so much easier to shoot. However, when we're in the main shooting window, there is another little part of the camera that we can access, and that's the Q menu, the quick menu. So if you press the set button or the Q button, in the quick menu, we've got our AF method, which we've already got a custom button for, our AF operation, so it's good to know we can switch between one shot and servo here, and our drive mode, which we've already obviously got set to a custom button. Our metering mode, I have that just set to evaluative. However, I usually do all of my metering by eye. I know this camera, I've been using it for a while now. I know where to expose the image so that we get most detail. Flicker, anti-flicker shoot, I've got this set to on. And then on the right hand side of the screen, we've got obviously our image quality, which we've already set up, and we're just gonna leave that. Our white balance, picture style, all these things, not really that important to change during a shoot. That's all the settings that I use on the EOS R. I hope you guys learned something in this video or got something out of it. If there's any other game changer settings that you know of, please leave them down in the comments below so everyone else can see. And if you have any other questions for me, let me know. I try to help out as many people as possible down in the comments section below. I hope you guys enjoyed this one once again. Thanks for joining me here, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.